Elliot Jensen never imagined his happiest day would begin with a heavy silence. Not celebration, not laughter, just silence. The kind that creeps into your bones and asks, is this really how it has to be? On a cold Wednesday morning in Copenhagen, he stared out his apartment window, watching the leaves stir in the wind. Matthias was asleep in their bed, chest rising with calm breaths, untouched by the storm Elliot had been carrying. He had grown used to making himself small, a quiet man with soft hands, clear eyes, and a mind that built perfect systems out of chaos. As a software engineer, Elliot solved problems with precision, but this wasn't code. This was love and family, and loss colliding like an unsolvable algorithm. They had met in a bookstore. Matthias, a Spanish teacher with laughter in his voice and eyes that felt like a promise, was looking for poetry. Elliot offered him a copy of Rilke. Their fingers touched. It began like all quiet revolutions do, gently. 3 years passed, steady and strong. They shared groceries, grief, early morning coffees, and the kind of dreams people whisper when the lights are off and the world feels kind. They got engaged in spring. The decision felt inevitable, not rushed. Not a dramatic proposal with rose petals or cameras, just a walk by the harbor, a ring passed between nervous fingers, and a nod that said, yes, I'm ready. They planned a small wedding for November. A warm dinner, some candles, the people who truly knew them. But Elliot's family had other plans. The calls began with polite concern. Have you thought about waiting? Then came the pressure. It would mean a lot to your brother. Then came the guilt. You can't possibly celebrate while Aaron is in prison. Aaron Jensen, the oldest son, a former youth counselor who lost everything in a single afternoon. His child Elliot's nephew drowned during a lakeside trip when Aaron failed to insist on a life vest. It was ruled manslaughter, negligent but not malicious. The court sentenced him, and the family closed ranks around him like a fortress. All pain became his, all loyalty, his right. Elliot mourned that boy with every cell of his body. He remembered the way the child clung to his legs, the way he giggled when lifted onto his shoulders. He hadn't spoken much about the loss, not even to Matthias. It lived in the silence between sentences, in the way Elliot avoided lakes and playgrounds. But now his family expected him to postpone his wedding for Aaron, for a man who, despite the tragedy, never once said I'm sorry out loud. He tried to reason with them. Aaron may never be released. You can't ask me to wait half a decade or more just to make you comfortable. But comfort wasn't the issue. Control was. His mother cried. His father hung up. His sister stopped replying. It was clear if he married Matthias now, he'd be choosing sides. And in their eyes, not the right one. Elliot stood in the kitchen that night, slicing vegetables for dinner, feeling the weight of it all in his chest. Matthias didn't say much. He knew when words only stirred the ache. Instead, he reached for Elliot's hand. They stood there for a long moment. No music, no speech, just warmth, just quiet understanding. On Thursday evening, they packed 2 dress shirts and a small folder of papers. On Friday morning, they took the train downtown. No rings, no guests, just 2 men walking into a government building, steady and certain. This wasn't the wedding Elliot had once dreamed of. But maybe, he thought, dreams are allowed to change. Maybe happiness isn't about who shows up for you, but who stays, even when the rest walk away. Because sometimes the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between staying silent and living out loud. Elliot chose the second. If you've ever had to choose between loyalty and self-love, you are not alone. Subscribe to Heart Story for more true, emotional stories of love, loss, and healing. The marble floor of the Copenhagen City Courthouse echoed faintly with each step Elliot took. He and Matthias arrived just before noon. There were no flowers, no suits tailored to perfection, just 2 men in simple button-down shirts, fingers brushing occasionally in the kind of touch that says, we know what this means, even if no one else does. The ceremony was brief. The clerk, efficient and polite, led them through the motions with quiet professionalism. Two strangers stood nearby to serve as witnesses, an elderly couple renewing their passports, now momentarily part of something sacred. There were no vows prepared. But when Matthias turned to Elliot, his voice low but steady, Elliot felt every word even before it was spoken. And when it was Elliot's turn, his voice trembled, slightly not from fear, but from the weight of choosing his life without asking anyone's permission. When the paperwork was signed and the modest congratulations were exchanged, Elliot stepped outside into the sharp, clean air of the city, heart racing not with adrenaline, but release. No applause, no hugs, only Matthias beside him, his hand warm and sure. They didn't go to a restaurant. There was no reception, no champagne toast or slow dance. Instead, they walked home through quiet streets, past shop windows and unfamiliar faces, holding hands like any other couple. Though something in them had shifted forever, the silence wasn't empty. It was chosen. Back at their apartment, they turned off their phones and unplugged the Wi-Fi. No emails, no calls, no social media, just a pause from the noise. A homemade pasta dish, a bottle of red wine, and an old playlist humming softly in the background. That weekend became their honeymoon. It didn't matter that there were no photographs to show or cards to open. Their marriage had already been witnessed by themselves, and that was enough. They stayed in bed until noon the next day, talked about places they wanted to see, books they wanted to write, languages they might learn together. They laughed, they rested, they kissed like people who had chosen each other in a world that told them not to. On Sunday night, they called Matthias's family in Madrid. The moment his mother heard the news, her voice broke into joyful tears. His sister demanded pictures. His father offered to toast them on video chat. The entire family celebrated, not the event itself, but the way Matthias glowed when he spoke. They saw his joy and honored it. They didn't need to understand every detail. They just chose love. Elliot, moved by the warmth, hesitated only briefly before dialing his own family. The silence after his announcement was long and heavy. When his mother finally spoke, her voice was clipped. "You should have waited." His father didn't come to the phone. His younger sister hung up after saying she needed time. His older brother, Aaron, of course, couldn't be reached. But the absence was still loud. That night, Elliot sat in the kitchen alone. He stared at his phone, rereading messages that once brought comfort and now felt distant. The word selfish echoed in his mind, not because he believed it, but because he was tired of defending himself from people who use love as a condition. Matthias found him there, hands resting on the table, eyes dimmed. He didn't ask what had happened. He simply poured him a glass of water and sat down beside him. It was the kind of quiet that holds space without filling it, the kind that makes room for healing. The next morning, Elliot made a choice. He deleted the family group chat, removed himself from the birthday calendar they all shared, unfollowed their profiles. One by one, he let go of the doorways that led only to more silence. He left only one thread open, a direct line to his youngest brother, the only person who hadn't yet spoken. For Elliot, the marriage was not an act of rebellion. It wasn't even resistance. It was survival. And now, survival looked like preserving what was still whole in his life and letting the broken pieces fall without trying to catch them. In that stillness, Elliot began to see something more clearly than ever before. Love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet. It signs a paper. It turns off a phone. It holds your hand through disappointment and says, "This life is still worth living." And the truth is, chosen peace will always be louder than imposed loyalty. The prison was farther from the city than Elliot remembered. A long stretch of gray road led through empty fields before the walls came into view. Tall, unwelcoming, wrapped in barbed wire. He hadn't been back since the trial, not since Aaron had stood in court, jaw clenched, refusing to cry, even when the sentence was read out loud. Elliot remembered this way their mother wept in the gallery, the way their father stared straight ahead, silent and unmoving. And Elliot, he just kept watching his brother, waiting for a moment of regret that never came. Now, seated in the visitation waiting room, Elliot clutched a small envelope in his hand. Inside was a single photo he and Matthias on the steps of the courthouse, just minutes after they'd signed the papers. Matthias had insisted they take it, not for Instagram or any announcement, but for them, for proof. Elliot had stared at it often in the weeks since. In the image, they were smiling, but there was something behind his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, or maybe hope. He had planned to give it to Aaron, to show him, not to demand approval, but to offer a sliver of his life that still longed for connection. The guard called his name, then paused. Sorry. He declined the visit. Elliot blinked. I came all this way. Can you check again? The guard looked apologetic but firm. He refused. He also left this. She handed him a folded sheet of lined paper, creased and handled too many times. His name was scrawled across the front in block letters. He didn't open it until he was back in the parking lot. Seated in the driver's seat of his rental car, the air inside was stale. The sun hit his arms through the windshield, but it didn't feel warm, just exposed. The note was brief. You made your choice. Don't come here again. You turned your back on this family. On me. Aaron. There was no signature, just a name like a label. Not your brother, not love. Aaron, just cold ink and finality. Elliot sat there for a long time, hands still gripping the note, as if pressure could rewrite the words. A slow, hollow ache opened in his chest, not just from the rejection, but from what it confirmed. Aaron didn't want to understand. He didn't want to meet the person Elliot had become. He only wanted a version of his brother that stayed quiet, stayed loyal, stayed small. He thought of the photo again, and of the child who had once wrapped tiny arms around him and called him Uncle E with a grin that made his heart swell. His nephew had loved superheroes and trucks and sour candy. He used to run across the yard whenever Elliot visited, shoes untied, hair wild. That boy was gone. Gone because someone didn't double-check a life vest. Gone because the lake didn't care about good intentions. Elliot had never blamed Aaron for the accident, not truly. Tragedy didn't need a villain. But what he couldn't forgive was the silence that followed. The refusal to say, I failed him. The refusal to say anything at all. He had written a letter of his own that morning, carefully folded and sealed. He had imagined slipping it into Aaron's hands. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even bitter. It just explained why he had married Matthias, why he couldn't wait. Why, after all these years, he needed to start choosing his own life. But now that letter felt pointless. Words couldn't bloom where hearts had been locked shut. Elliot got out of the car, walked to the nearest trash bin beside the guard booth, and dropped the letter in. He stood there a moment longer, watching the paper disappear beneath the lid. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "This is goodbye." He didn't cry, not yet. The grief would come later, in quiet waves in the hum of a washing machine, in a half-finished sentence, in the middle of a slow Sunday morning. But in that moment, there was only stillness, a strange clarity that sometimes the people we miss most aren't the ones we need to return to. They're the ones we need to release. Back on the road, Elliot drove without music. The fields passed by again, and the sky opened above him, wide and indifferent. For the first time in months, there was no pressure to answer a call, to smooth over a wound he didn't cause. Only space, only forward. Some relationships don't end in fights. They end in a pause that never lifts. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to stop trying to fix what refuses to bend. Letting go isn't weakness. It's choosing to live without waiting for permission. The apartment smelled faintly of basil and lemon oil, the way it always did after Matthias cleaned the kitchen. Elliot sat by the window, the afternoon light casting soft shadows on the floor. A half-finished cup of tea cooled beside him. In his lap was a legal pad, nearly full, the lines dense with ink. It was the third draft of the letter. The first two were crumpled in the trash, rejected not for what they said, but for what they didn't. He wasn't writing to change minds. He knew better by now. He was writing for release. One final message to the family that had raised him, loved him in their own way, and now could no longer see him beyond the lens of disappointment. The letter was addressed to three people: his parents and his youngest brother, the only ones who had heard the news and chosen silence. He began with the truth, plainly, that he and Matthias had married, that it wasn't a secret out of shame, but out of necessity, that after years of living quietly, of asking for space that was never granted, he had decided to stop seeking permission to exist. He wrote of Aaron too, not with resentment, but with clarity. I loved him. I mourned with him. But I cannot delay my life for someone who refuses to carry the weight of what he's done. I didn't turn my back on him. I just stepped forward. He didn't justify himself. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He explained, instead, what it meant to him to have stood in a courthouse beside the man he loves and say, "This is who I choose without a choir, without a priest, without applause. I didn't choose sides." He wrote, "I chose my life." When he sealed the envelope, he didn't hesitate. He didn't reread it. He simply slid it into the mailbox near their building, walked home, and allowed the door to close gently behind him. The days that followed moved slowly. Friends at work began to notice the ring on his finger. Some asked softly, was it recent? Others didn't ask at all, just smiled with quiet warmth when they noticed. No one questioned why there wasn't a party, why no photos had been posted. They simply honored what they saw: a man who was finally settled into himself, despite the absence of confetti. Word spread, emails from former classmates trickled in. A colleague left a note on his desk, handwritten, saying, "You're brave in ways most of us never are." At lunch, a woman from another team sat beside him and whispered, "My brother came out last year. I hope I handled it half as well as your husband's family did." And still, nothing from his own. Not a message, not even a silence loud enough to acknowledge the event. Matthias never pushed. He moved gently through those days, offering space, warmth, distraction. And one quiet evening, exactly 1 week after the letter had been sent, he came home with a narrow, rectangular box wrapped in brown paper. "I know you didn't want gifts," he said, "but this isn't about the wedding." Inside was a small oil painting, a child no older than 6 grinning with wild curls and scraped knees, sitting on a tree swing. The sky behind him was gold, almost glowing. On the back, in Matthias's careful handwriting, were 7 words: "You still carry him with you." Elliot stared at the painting for a long time. His hands didn't tremble, but something in his chest shifted, gently. That boy, his nephew, was gone. But love, especially the kind that's pure and unfiltered, never vanishes. It remains in the stories we tell, in the silence we endure, in the decisions we make to keep moving, even when those we love won't walk beside us. He placed the painting on their bedroom wall, beside the window. Not a shrine, not a burden. Just a quiet reminder that grief and joy are not rivals. They can exist in the same space. They often do. That night, as they lay in bed, Elliot felt something he hadn't allowed himself in weeks: rest. Not just sleep, but rest. The kind that comes when you've said everything that needed to be said, and nothing more. Sometimes peace isn't loud, it's not dramatic. It doesn't come with resolution. Sometimes, it's just the steady return to yourself after you've been stretched too thin by love that asks too much. And sometimes, healing doesn't ask others to change. It only asks that you stop waiting for them to. Winter arrived quietly in Copenhagen. The wind had softened, the trees stood bare but still, and the city seemed to exhale after holding its breath for too long. Inside the apartment, Elliot adjusted to the rhythm of stillness, the kind that follows a choice no one celebrates but you. Weeks had passed since he sent the letter, since the painting from Matthias had taken its place on their wall, since he stopped looking at his phone, hoping for a name to flash across the screen. He didn't expect anything more. Silence, by now, felt familiar. almost comforting. But one afternoon, just as the sun tipped behind the rooftops, his phone buzzed. A single message, no preamble, no explanation. "I don't understand everything, but I miss you." It was from his youngest brother. Elliot stared at the words, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He hadn't heard from him since before the wedding. The same brother who had posted vacation photos days after Elliot's announcement and never said a word. The one he hadn't deleted from his contacts, not because of hope, but because of unfinished pages between them. They agreed to meet the next day. Not at home, not somewhere public. Just a quiet cafe a few blocks away, neutral ground, untouched by memory. When Elliot arrived, his brother was already there, seated by the window, 2 cups on the table. He looked older than Elliot remembered, or maybe it was Elliot who had aged, in invisible ways. They didn't hug. There were no outbursts, no apologies, just a nod, a sip of coffee, the comfort of being known, even when understanding had not caught up. They talked, not about family or Aaron or what had been said or left unsaid. They spoke about small things: work, the rising rent, a mutual friend who had moved to Amsterdam. The distance between them, once sharp, now sat quiet, like a coat neither wanted to take off, but neither wanted to carry forever. At one point, Elliot looked at his brother and said, gently, "You don't have to say anything." His brother nodded. "I know, that was all. That was enough." They parted with a half smile, no promises, no guarantees. But Elliot walked home with something softer in his chest, a crack of light where bitterness used to live. He hadn't seen Aaron. He hadn't spoken to his parents. That hadn't changed. But he no longer needed it to, because healing had taken root in quieter places. Some people believe closure comes from the one who hurt you, from an apology, from a reckoning. But Elliot had learned something else entirely sometimes. The most powerful kind of peace comes not from being understood, but from letting go of needing to be. That evening, as he and Matthias folded laundry, Elliot tucked away the painting of his nephew in a new frame, one with a deeper border, sturdier glass. Not to forget, but to protect it, to preserve what mattered. The next morning, he logged into work, greeted his team, and smiled when a new colleague complimented the photo of Matthias on his desk. He didn't flinch. He didn't shrink. He simply said, "That's my husband," and returned to writing code. Life didn't look perfect, but it looked like his. He had not forgiven Aaron. He didn't know if he ever would. But he also didn't need to carry that weight forever. Not when there was still laughter in the mornings, and soft music in the kitchen, and a man beside him who never once asked him to be anyone else. Forgiveness, he realized, doesn't have to be given or received to be useful. Sometimes it's just a decision to stop letting the past make your choices for you. And sometimes, choosing yourself every day, quietly, without spectacle, is the loudest answer of all. Have you ever had to move on without getting the apology you deserved? Tell us your story in the comments. Your voice might help someone else find theirs. Subscribe to Heart Story for more true, emotional stories about identity, healing, and the strength it takes to live honestly. Don't wait to be seen. Be seen.